Hello and welcome to Inside the Americas. Coming up, Joe Biden makes an unannounced visit to Ukraine before meeting members of NATO's eastern flank in Poland. Concern mounting as Russia's Vladimir Putin doubles down on his invasion. Once the face of Mexico's war on drugs, Genaro Garcia Luna has been convicted by a U.S. jury of drug trafficking. The former security minister was found guilty of taking millions of dollars in bribes from the Sinaloa cartel. And for the first time in 3 years, full-scale Carnival is back in Rio de Janeiro. Millions of revelers pouring out into the streets. We'll take a closer look at the festivities. Well, the U.S. president made a whirlwind 4-day trip to Ukraine and Poland. Joe Biden wanting to reassure allies that his administration is aware of the threats and impacts spurred by the grinding Russian invasion of Ukraine. He began his trip with a surprise visit to Kyiv, a highly complex security operation. Later, he delivered a message in Warsaw of hope and support for Ukraine. Take a listen.
The United States, together with our allies and partners, are going to continue to have Ukraine's back as it defends itself. Next year, I will host every member of NATO for our 2024 summit in the United States. And let there be no doubt, the commitment of the United States to our NATO alliance and Article 5 is rock solid. And every member of NATO knows it, and Russia knows it as well.
For more, we can speak to our international affairs editor, Angela Diffley. Hello to you, Angela.
Hi, Will.
Biden already implicating himself in this war, but even more so now.
Yeah, this was a very, very highly choreographed, staged, managed business in Europe this week. So first of all, we had him arriving in Kyiv, top secret, nobody knew. Apparently the Russians were warned in case they tried to bomb Kyiv and an enormous crisis was precipitated. But otherwise, a very, very secret visit. He met with Zelensky. We saw them talking together. That doesn't do Joe Biden any harm at home. He looked strong, tough guy image there next to Zelensky. Then, of course, Poland, and this very, very dramatic, epic speech where Biden really gave the narrative, a very feel-good American narrative. He thanked the Polish for their fantastic generosity, and he lauded the Ukrainians for this unbelievable spirit of resistance. And there was the US there, he said, which is embodying freedom. And this idea that the US leads NATO, that the Russians invaded, that the Ukrainians resisted, and then NATO comes to the rescue, and this war will be won. This is a battle between democracy and autocracy, said Joe Biden. All of that is very important in terms of morale boosting a year into this war. There's been a lot of American money, $30 billion of money spent on Ukraine, but it's also important to tell both the people on Ukraine, on Ukraine's doorstep, and the people back home in America, what this is all about in American terms.
Yeah, and morale boosting, you mentioned, they're very important because after 1 year of fighting, year two looks like it could be even more difficult.
Yes, it's widely expected that the Russians are about to launch an offensive. And that is why the Ukrainians have been so desperately asking for more and more ammunition. Recently, we had them asking for tanks, which they got from the US. There is a real worry as well from Zelensky that the countries supporting Ukraine, their populations will experience some sort of compassion fatigue. Also, Russia has very many more fighters that it can put into the field than Ukraine does. We've already seen Putin has brought in conscripts. There are prisoners, former convicts being used in the Wagner mercenary forces. There is a lot of manpower in Russia which can be used, and Ukraine, of course, has a much smaller population. So the next year, it's very difficult to say how it will go. In the immediate term, everyone is looking towards this spring offensive.
All right, Angela, thank you very much.
Thanks, Will.
Last spring, in an act of political theater over the migrant crisis, the Republican governors of Texas and Florida began a controversial policy of shipping migrants north to so-called sanctuary cities. One of them was New York, which since then has received some 44,000 asylum seekers. Facing an unprecedented influx of new arrivals, the city has been struggling to provide for them, and now it is coming up with other solutions, like sending them north to Canada. Take a look.
New York City's busiest bus station, Port Authority, has become a hub for migrants. Local officials who once criticised Texas leaders for putting migrants on buses north are now doing the same themselves. Here at Port Authority, the city gives out free bus tickets for migrants who want to go to New York's northern border and cross over into Canada. Zulema left Peru in April last year. She crossed the US southern border via Mexico in June and came here to New York.
It's hard coming to the United States, and it's even more difficult to get by once you're here.
Zulema has tried to make a life here, but her work papers are taking too long. While waiting, she's been volunteering, helping advise other migrants. But now she's also getting on that free bus to the northern border.
But I am 100% grateful to New York because the city provided free housing and free food. But I am a bit sad that I didn't achieve my American dream.
The majority of migrants heading north are from Latin America, but there are others from Africa, including Mohammed, who's from Sudan. He has his ticket ready.
I search the better life. I search for safety, search to work, excellent work, like this.
The bus heads north to Plattsburgh, New York. The journey takes about 6 hours. From Plattsburgh, it's a 30-minute taxi ride to the US border with Canada.
They didn't give us the opportunities that I was hoping for. The whole process is very complicated and expensive. In fact, as of yesterday, we became homeless, and so we decided to look towards Canada. It's a beautiful country.
Once in a taxi, migrant families head to the border crossing at Roxham Road, a rural spot in Clinton County, New York. There, they're greeted by locals.
Canada is good. It's a good country. We want to live there more than here.
Last year, more than 39,000 asylum seekers crossed into Quebec via Roxham Road. That's double the previous record from 2017.
We've arrived. We can finally feel safe here. This is the final destination and we'll stay here. That's what we wanted. To make it to Canada. The kids too. The future's theirs.
It's the first time these kids have seen snow.
The architect of Mexico's war on drugs was convicted by a U.S. jury on all 5 counts he faced of aiding the very smuggling he was tasked with cracking down on. Federal prosecutors in New York said that Genaro Garcia Luna accepted millions of dollars in bribes from the cartel once run by El Chapo. Olivia Bizzo has more.
The very man responsible for working with the US to enforce the war on drugs has himself been convicted of drug trafficking. Genaro Garcia Luna has been found guilty of helping Mexico's biggest crime group, the Sinaloa drug cartel, flood US cities with cocaine. In a statement, US Attorney Brian Peace said,
Garcia Luna, who once stood at the pinnacle of law enforcement in Mexico, will now live the rest of his days having been revealed as a traitor to his country and to the honest members of law enforcement who risked their lives to dismantle drug cartels.
Garcia Luna served as Mexico's public security secretary, and he's the architect of its deadly and protracted war on drugs. He's the highest-ranking Mexican official to ever stand trial in the US, and his conviction is likely to further dent the reputation of Mexico's security.
The whole time he was working with these cartels to coordinate bringing it into the United States. So a huge deal, and also a lot more there. I mean, if he was involved, what about his boss, the former president, Felipe Calderón? What about other presidents? A lot of other big questions about Mexico's security forces and politicians.
Garcia Luna pleaded not guilty to all charges and can appeal the ruling. He will be sentenced on June the 27th. He faces a mandatory minimum sentence of 20 years in prison and a maximum of life behind bars.
And we end in Brazil after two pandemic-disrupted carnivals and a divisive presidential election in October. The world's biggest carnival is back at full-scale festivities. Millions of revelers pouring out into the streets. James Messina has more.
Day and night, Brazilians take to the streets for a week-long celebration all around the country. Here in Rio de Janeiro, samba schools are showing off their floats and costumes as they dance their way through the specially built Sambadrome Stadium.
I'm very nervous. It's my first year as the school's muse, but everything will be fine. I'm very happy, very emotional, and giving it everything.
The schools spend months handcrafting everything for the parade in the hope of being crowned winners.
The expectations are very high. We're showing our work to the public, to the judges, who all love Carnival. It's a massive event and it feels great to be part of such a big show.
It's the first full-scale version of the event since the COVID-19 pandemic. Last year, street parties were banned and the official parades were postponed. A relief that also comes after another polarising election that has seen Lula da Silva replace Jair Bolsonaro as president of the country.
It's a double joy because we're free again, with freedom of expression and the fight for our rights so that all of us are equal, with no difference between races. I think this carnival is a celebration of the victory of democracy.
Carnival parades were often politically charged during the previous government, with samba schools using their platform to address issues like racism, environmental destruction, and the mismanagement of the pandemic. Now, traditional themes like cultural and musical heritage are back on the agenda, providing a welcome dose of escapism for Brazilians making the most of this national holiday.
Well, that's it for this edition of Inside the Americas. Thank you for watching, and please stay tuned to France 24.
France 24, more than ever before, is your window onto the world.
Liberté, égalité, actualité.